Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into some really fascinating source material about spiritual growth. Our mission, as always, is to unpack these often complex sources and pull out the insights you can actually think about. And the focus, it's the teachings of the Sacred Atlantean Brotherhood, or SAB. We're looking specifically at how they approached community and spiritual mastery.
Right, and what's immediately striking, I think, is this central idea they had. It kind of goes against the grain of how many people think about spiritual development.
That's so.
Well, the usual image is meditating alone on the mountaintop, right? Isolation,
Mm-hmm.
silence. The SAB sources seem to suggest the complete opposite.
Okay.
They argue that real, profound spiritual growth doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens within a group, a community where members actively, deliberately, well, they call it simulating life.
Simulating life. Okay, let's dig into that. So it's like the community itself is a kind of training ground.
Exactly, a sophisticated one.
Not just a place to belong, but a place to practice for the real world. Preparing for the bigger challenges out there by learning how to interact harmoniously, or at least constructively, within this smaller group first. Like a rehearsal.
It's a great way to put it, a behavioral rehearsal for life. And this is central to what the sources attribute to Grandmaster WaXhira.
WaXhira, right?
His core teaching, apparently, was something like, the greatest test of spiritual mastery isn't found in isolation, but in the relationships we foster. He supposedly saw people gain peace alone, only to lose it instantly back in the hustle and bustle.
Yeah, that makes sense. Relationships are the tough part.
They're the proving ground. So the Brotherhood community was designed to be this, well, unique safe space for the simulation,
Yeah.
a place to practice dealing with those relationship dynamics.
Okay, safe space is interesting. How safe can it really be if it's meant to prepare you for the, unsafe real world? Doesn't that remove the necessary risk, the actual
That's a really important question, and the sources address it. It wasn't about bubble wrap. The safety wasn't about avoiding conflict. It was about how conflict was handled.
Okay.
It seems the simulation was structured. There were specific, sometimes even role-played scenarios, maybe designed by more advanced members, meant to trigger reactions. And any organic conflict that came up wasn't just smoothed over.
So what happened?
It was processed immediately, with feedback, with mentors, making sure it stayed constructive, not destructive. The safety was in the processing, the boundaries, the learning from the stumble.
So you could genuinely try things out, test responses to challenges, face your own triggers, experiment with how you engage without, say, getting fired or ending a friendship.
Exactly. You could stumble, figure out why, and get back up, all within a framework designed for that exact purpose. It allowed members to practice without devastating real-world consequences.
So they're essentially turning abstract virtues like patience, understanding, into practical, usable tools, things you actually do, not just think about.
Yes, precisely. The SAB view, as presented, seems very behavioral. Spirituality isn't just an internal state, it's how you act, especially under pressure. Can you maintain that virtue when someone's pushing your buttons? That's the mastery.
Okay, let's get into specifics then. What virtues did they really focus on honing in this simulation?
Two really stand out in the materials. The first one is patience. And their definition seems quite robust.
More than just waiting in line.
Definitely. It's described as the ability to stay internally calm, composed, sovereign, even when things outside are frustrating or difficult, maybe even deliberately provocative within the simulation.
That sounds challenging, especially now with everything being instant.
Right. They apparently saw patience as foundational. In a world rushing for quick results, the ability to pause, to not react instantly, that's where wisdom starts. It's about choosing your response.
And I remember reading about a specific technique here, the 30-second pause.
Yes, that's mentioned. Apparently, during any conflict or moment of rising irritation within the Brotherhood setting, members were required to just stop. No words, no actions. For 30 seconds before responding.
30 seconds feels like an eternity in a heated moment.
I imagine so.
Yeah.
But that's the point, isn't it? Creating that internal space. By practicing that non-reaction in the community, they build the muscle memory for it. So when they face real challenges outside, they have that capacity for poise, for grace under pressure.
Okay, so patience is one cornerstone. What's the second?
Tolerance. And again, it seems they took it deeper than just live and let live.
How so?
The practice was apparently focused on actively dismantling judgment, especially the unconscious kind, the stuff we project onto others because of our own issues.
So it's internal work first. Learning to accept differences fundamentally, letting people walk their own path without you imposing your own standards or expectations on them.
Exactly. And think about why that's crucial in this kind of community. It sounds like they deliberately brought together diverse people, different backgrounds, different strengths, different flaws.
Right. For the simulation to work, people have to feel safe enough to be flawed, to make mistakes.
Precisely. If the environment is riddled with judgment, nobody's going to risk showing their weak spots. So practicing this deep tolerance, especially during simulated disagreements or even deliberate tests set by senior members, kept the space, well, nurturing. It allowed people to thrive and fail without being crushed by misunderstanding or condemnation.
Okay, so we have these internal pillars. Patience, the ability to wait and choose a response, and tolerance, the ability to accept without judgment. But that's internal. How do they connect this to engaging with the outside world effectively?
That's the next layer. Practicing these things constantly, day in, day out in the simulation, develops what the sources call emotional and spiritual resilience.
Resilience. We hear that word a lot. What did it mean for them?
It seems it wasn't just about bouncing back after something bad happens. It was more about the ability to stay centered and stable during the difficulty, to navigate tough situations with wisdom and grace as they're happening.
That makes sense. And on a more practical level, I was struck by their focus on public speaking. Seems almost counterintuitive for a, perhaps, secretive spiritual group.
It does at first glance, doesn't it? But the logic presented is clear. If you gain wisdom, you have a responsibility to share it, effectively, clearly.
So public speaking wasn't just about performance, it was about clarity of truth, being able to articulate complex spiritual ideas without muddying the waters.
Exactly. Mastery of self had to connect to mastery of communication, especially for those who might eventually teach or guide others outside the Brotherhood.
And how did they practice that in their safe space?
They apparently called it friendly fire. The community itself was the practice audience. You'd speak, present ideas, maybe even debate within the structured simulation rules.
Including the 30-second pause, maybe?
Quite possibly. And then you'd get immediate, detailed, constructive feedback from your peers. It was designed to build confidence, eloquence, the ability to think on your feet, all in preparation for facing a potentially skeptical, wider world.
So it all ties together. The internal work on patience and tolerance, practice through simulation, builds resilience. And the communication skills allow you to express that integrated wisdom.
Yes. The idea is that by consciously practicing these qualities in countless small interactions, they stop being things you try to do and start becoming who you are. They get ingrained in your character. That's what shapes your instinctive responses out in the real world.
Okay, this sounds like a very structured system. How did someone actually, move through it? What was the path like? The sources mentioned degrees, right?
Yes, a clear progression. It started with 3 public degrees, these were the entry levels, where newcomers would first get immersed in this whole simulation environment.
It's focusing on the basics.
Exactly. Really drilling down on patience, understanding, communication, learning the rules of engagement, like maybe that 30-second pause. And progressing seems to have involved specific challenges,
Right.
like successfully navigating a deliberately designed conflict simulation without breaking the core principles. Showing you hadn't just learned the idea, but could actually do it under pressure. It was about demonstrating behavioral integration.
So practical tests, and then after the public degrees.
Then came the more advanced, apparently exclusive degrees. The sources mentioned two, navigator and captain. And here the role really shifts.
How so? From student to?
To something more like a designer or leader. The navigator level sounds particularly interesting.
What did navigators do?
They were apparently the ones who designed the simulation challenges for the lower degrees. They'd create scenarios, maybe introduce specific points of friction to test particular virtues in others.
Wow, so they were intentionally creating difficulties for people.
For their growth, yes. According to the sources, often the person being tested wouldn't even know it was a structured test. The navigators weren't just deepening their own practice. They were actively guiding the development of others through carefully managed adversity.
That's a heavy responsibility, knowing you're provoking someone even for their own good.
And the final stage, Captain.
Captain seems to represent embodied mastery, the stewards of the whole system. They had to perfectly embody all the virtues and synthesize the lessons coming out of simulations, keeping the training relevant to whatever challenges the external world was presenting at the time.
So, ultimate responsibility for the collective's growth and integrity.
Yes. Self-mastery fully applied to leadership and guidance.
Okay, let's try to wrap this up. What's the big takeaway here? The SAB seems to be making a really strong case that spiritual growth isn't just about quiet contemplation or reading books.
Not at all. True mastery, in their view, comes from the messy, demanding practice of these principles. Patience, tolerance, clear communication, resilience in our everyday interactions with each other. The simulation is the path.
Precisely. And that leads right back to that quote attributed to Grandmaster WaXhira. Through the Brotherhood's practices, we learn to simulate life, to become the creators of our reality.
Wow.
Every interaction is an opportunity to master ourselves and become the best versions of who we were always meant to be. It connects every single moment, every conversation, every disagreement to that ultimate goal.
A very integrated, very demanding, but potentially very powerful philosophy. It makes you think.
It really does. And perhaps that's the final thought for you listening right now. If this SAB model holds any truth, that mastery comes from mastering interactions, from practicing patience and non-judgment when you're challenged, then what opportunities are you missing? Where in your daily life, your family, your work, your community, could you be more intentional about practicing these things? Where is your safe space to maybe stumble, learn, and try again, consciously building that resilience and mastery one interaction at a time? Something to consider.